Rev.
Run Against Violence.
Welcome to Season 3 of the Rev podcast.
This year's theme is Caring Conversations.
We acknowledge the traditional owners of land and waters that this podcast is recorded on.
It's interesting because I feel like something I've been reflecting on lately as well. Like, my whole life is a trauma response so far. Like, it's everything I do is a trauma response. I go really hard at things. So before the Survivor Hub, I was just doing sort of research work, and so I went really hard at that. And that's all, I gave all my time to that. And now with the Survivor Hub, I give all my time to the Survivor Hub and split with research work as well. So it's interesting because it is, and the work, because when I do give my 110% to something, it's really good. It feels meaningful, feels productive. It feels like it's also a distraction. But if I also know it's valuable because I get to help other people and feel like I'm making a bit of a difference, and that's really helpful for my healing. But I do notice that you do get burnt out quite easily. So then there are times where I will wake up and go, no, today's not happening. I try, but nothing happens, and I'm just like a potato on a couch for a little bit too long. So I think as well, like over time, I've learned to go, actually, no, that's okay. Give myself space to be whatever I need to be in that time. But then at the end of the day, or whatever the next period of time is, I'm going to pick myself up and start again.
Yes.
Yes. And look, for me, getting outside is often really helpful. So I have a little husky. She's absolutely beautiful. We go for lots of walks together. And sometimes if I've had a really bad day, I'll eat junk food, sit on the couch, cry, do all the above, and just feel really sorry for myself. But then actually, no, I'm done. And now I have to move on and have to keep on going. So let's go outside and reset.
Hello, I'm Patty Kikos and welcome to our latest chat with Brenda Lin. For some of us, myself included, her name seemed familiar, but I couldn't quite place it at first. I met Brenda when she was one of the speakers for an event that I had attended, and was so taken by her story that I asked to interview her for our podcast. And when I did my research into her background, I was taken aback at who I had just encountered. Not only is she one of the co-founders of the Survivor Hub, an organisation that I have referred many of my own clients to over the years, but she and her family hold a file in my memory bank that I've never been able to erase. When Brenda was just 15, she was away in New Caledonia on a school trip, and with limited access to smartphones and social media back then, she ended up clicking on a Facebook link to discover that her mother, father, aunt, and brothers Henry and Terry had been killed. After being sent to live with another aunt and her husband, in a cruel twist of fate, not only was her uncle then found guilty of having committed those murders, but in another act of betrayal, had started to sexually assault Brenda. At the time of this recording, Brenda is 30, so she has officially spent half her life learning to live, survive, and then try to thrive without her family of origin, but then start over again when she had to leave her aunt's home. In this interview, we chat about how we can connect to people that have a completely different cultural background or identity to us in a way that is respectful but also caring. In fact, how do we reach out to individuals like Brenda who have endured such trauma that is unimaginable? Our recording had to be rescheduled and she gave up her lunch hour to speak with me. And while the internet behaved mostly well, there were a few times we were tested, but I'm sure that won't take away from her remarkable story. You've described yourself, Brenda, as being ABC. Can you share more about what that means to you for our listeners?
Yeah, of course. So ABC, that stands for Australian Born Chinese. And what that means is that I was born here, but my parents are from China. So they grew up in China, migrated over to Australia, I think in their late 20s, decided to set up life here, and had me and my brothers.
Did you speak English when you were little, or did you speak Cantonese or Mandarin?
Yes. So when I was younger, my grandparents also came over to Australia to help look after us. So my parents, they went to work during the day, and my grandparents looked after me. My grandparents are from China as well, couldn't speak a word of English, still can't. And so which meant that then between I think 0 and 5, I didn't speak any English at all. And I remember going to school and arriving at school and being absolutely petrified because I couldn't understand anything that anyone else was saying.
I can relate to that. It's very common among immigrant families, isn't it? By the time we were 7, we'd be filling out application forms on behalf of our parents.
Yes.
Yeah, very
and correcting their English or their grammar, or would like proofread all the letters they write as well. So
that's exactly right. So was it Mandarin or Cantonese that you spoke?
Mandarin.
And I know that you've said that doing well at school was important to you, as it was something that was also very pertinent to your family. I mean, what was school like for you in primary? You mentioned you didn't speak a word of English initially.
Yeah, so they often talked about how well they did in classes and how low they came first or second or third in their tests, and they were very proud of it. And at home, that was always communicated to us about the importance of education, because if you got educated, that meant you got more opportunities in life. And my parents grew up in China during a period of great change. You've got the Cultural Revolution, you've got the Great Famine. So people didn't have anything, and the only way to sort of get above and just to survive was to do well academically. And so they sort of brought that sort of mindset back to Australia, and they really encouraged me and my brothers to do well at school. And they talked a lot about the sacrifices they made to get them to Australia, or to get themselves to Australia, so they could give us the best chances of succeeding, give us the best possible life. So obviously we as kids were very grateful for that, but also that it's then having a bit of pressure to also, I guess, honour that opportunity that we've been given as well.
Brenda, you've described your parents as not being overly affectionate or even tactile, possibly due to their own cultural upbringing. Did you feel safe and loved at home?
Oh, no, absolutely, of course. My parents, I think this is maybe somewhat common in Asian families as well, where they aren't overly sort of tactile in terms of like the hugging, the kissing. I could probably count on my hands like the number of times I saw them sort of physically show affection to each other. So that wasn't going on at home, but despite that, or in spite of that, I still knew they loved us very much, and they always told us that. So I was very grateful for that. But I think they showed love in a very different way, and the way they sort of showed love was really through sacrifice and through sort of you're making sure that we had the best sort of opportunities, giving us what we needed so we could succeed.
What was your transition into high school like, especially as your mum had become unwell? You mentioned that she had developed schizophrenia.
Most definitely. It's very scary. And so I think around year 7 is when I started to sort of notice that, my mum was starting to say things like, look, there's certain people saying things to me or wanting me to do certain things that...
So she was experiencing paranoia, she was experiencing delusions.
And I don't think, at the time I believed her as well, and I didn't realise that was a mental health issue. And it wasn't until I think maybe in year 9 at school where we sort of did mental health in class and PDHPE classes, where that sort of, then I learned about schizophrenia, and went, oh my goodness, everything I'm learning about schizophrenia, all those symptoms, they line up to all the things that my mum is experiencing as well. So, and obviously through that period as well, I know we still struggled as a family to sort of get her diagnosed, especially given that mental health isn't something that is very sort of understood or talked about within the Chinese sort of community.
Especially back then, right?
Yeah, mental health isn't real. If you're feeling depressed, just get over it. So I think there was quite some time where my dad didn't believe what was going on with my mum, just wanted to get over it. Obviously that wasn't happening. Then obviously getting her to get sort of medicated and get treatment as well, that was also hard, because with someone with schizophrenia, they believe all the things they're hearing and seeing or whatever it is, it's very real to them. So there was lots of very frustrating moments at home.
And this started from when you were in year 7.
And it's got progressively worse throughout her life as well. So I think it was sort of a little bit in year 7, I heard about it. It was sort of manageable. She could still do the things that she did in day-to-day life. But as the years went by, it meant that in particular, the newsagent where my mum and dad worked, she couldn't really work there or do anything at the front counter because she was thinking that there are certain people who were coming in wanting her to do things that they don't want her to do. So she was obviously responding to that and wasn't quite appropriate for what she was doing.
Brenda, you were a keynote speaker at an event that I attended. It's actually where we met. And you spoke about having experienced homicide in your family, but you didn't go into the details. It was only later when I approached you and I asked you to be on the podcast. Obviously, I started to research you, that I realized I, along with many in my generation and possibly older, have a parasocial relationship with you. And so what I mean by that is that we feel a connection to you and we feel like we know you or of you, but you don't necessarily know who we are. So we often as a society have parasocial connections with celebrities or actors or singers. And you're certainly in that realm as well, because after reading and remembering what had occurred, obviously I felt a connection to you. And to be really honest with you, I also felt emotional and overjoyed to see that you appear to be thriving in your life, because this was an event that was beyond a local community or beyond a state. It literally rocked the nation, much like what would have happened with Lindy Chamberlain in the 70s. You shared basic details of what had happened without going into laborious details. Is that because you're also conscious of not imposing shock and trauma onto someone that you just meet?
Yes, most definitely. And look, this is something I've had to really deal with and learn throughout the years as well. So my family, I lost my family in 2009. So that's 15 years ago. I'm now 30. So I've lived half of my life with them and half of them without. So I've also had I've had a lot of time to process and to think about it and to make sense of what's happened. And also I've had a long time sort of just to where I have had to disclose that to someone I'm sort of who's in front of me or in a particular context. And I've seen lots of different reactions as well. And through that, I have, and I'm still working on this, so I don't have the final answer yet, but I've gotten a little bit better at sort of gauging when it is appropriate to say something or when is it not appropriate to say something, or even if it is, how much and to what extent I say something, because I very much recognize that, it's for someone who's hearing it for the first time, they are hearing it for the first time, yes, and they're trying to make sense of it in their head, whereas I've had a long time to sort of deal and manage with and sort of work it out in your head, so in my head. So it is, I recognize it's really, really tough for people to hear it, and part of, I guess, being caring and loving as well is making sure that if it does need to be shared, that I'm sharing in a way that is sort of caring for the other person and sort of is kind as well.
Yeah, that's right. Because many people won't have the benefit of having seen this happen on the news like I did. For example, I remember where I was when Princess Diana died. I remember where I was when I found out that your family had been murdered. That's how big a deal it was. There will be many people, unlike myself, that will have heard it for the very, very first time that won't necessarily have the reference that I did as well.
And look, given the work that I do as well, that sometimes is a bit of it is quite hard to know where that is, because I'm a criminologist, I'm a researcher. I also run the Survivor Hub as well. So both those sort of roles I hold have some sort of tie in with the justice system. And especially in my criminology role, I have taught classes where when we talk about the justice system, we talk about offenders, we talk about different crimes, and those have actually been really great for me, really great teaching moments and opportunities to share my story, but also it's gauging when do I share, when do I not share, how much do I share, what point of that that semester do I share as well.
I imagine that what you say gets curated over the years, depending on your own healing, depending on your own integration of the trauma that you experienced, and also just depending on your capacity at the time, because you give so much.
Most definitely. Yeah. And I think at first I always felt like, oh, maybe I'm doing this, but it's not bothering me because I've talked about it in court heaps before, and I can easily talk about it and I can answer questions. But I think it took me a while to realize that I could sort of do that, but afterwards I'd be really exhausted. I probably would then be in quite a bad mood. It might be like later that evening, might be the next day or so, or might be like the following week. So there was that pattern happening as well. So I think it's also part of experiencing trauma, where it's that fawning response where, when someone does ask you a question, you want to be compliant, you want to please, you want to sort of help as much as you can. It's definitely been a learning journey, and I'm still on it, and that's okay.
I'm actually really glad that you mentioned it, because on a smaller scale, with something that isn't as big as what you experienced, Brenda, we often can relay something that happened to us, and then we feel like we've got a vulnerability hangover afterwards. Because we can't see or feel our emotions like we can feel our body. There is that after effect, and it's not always immediate, is it?
No, it isn't. And then look, it took me quite some time to figure it out, like the connection. You would think that'd be really easy to sort of figure it out, but because it's, as you said, because it's not immediately after, and it might not come out in ways that are very obvious either, and just be like, I'm just feeling really tired, or I'm just in a bad mood because someone else has done something. Maybe they have done something, but but the way you're responding to it is disproportionate or different to how you otherwise would have responded.
Yes. Yes. It's actually a wonderful explanation of how trauma works. It doesn't make sense to those of us that aren't aware. I mean, as you know, our theme for this year's podcast is care and conversations. With the benefit of the hindsight that you have now, what is something that a safe person could have said to you back then that could have made the world of difference in your own life?
I think it's just letting me know that they're there for me. That I don't have to share anything now if I don't wish to, but if I do, they're there to listen, and they're happy to listen to however much I wish to share and however little I wish to share. And I think just maybe having that repeated and just reminded at various points in time, because it's really easy when like something's just happened to say that to someone, but then people forget after a while. And I was very lucky because I did have lots of really great people around me who did do those check-ins, and which meant that when I was stuck or there were particular situations where I really needed support, it was easy to reach out. So, and looking at something I've also had to learn as well, is reaching out and accepting help, and that's not always easy.
No, I can imagine. And when you say having people tell you that they're there for you, does that include letting them know, or letting someone know, I'm here for you, not just when you're feeling good. I'm here for you when you're angry or mad. You don't need to be your best self for me. Is that something that was helpful for you?
Definitely is helpful, but it's so hard to also take on that help, like take on that sort of offer as well. But yeah, definitely helpful, because I think that's for me, that was something that I was quite scared about. So being scared that if I wasn't the best version of myself because I don't have parents or don't have a family, will I just be too much trouble? Will I just be too difficult and people will just give up on me? So, and I think, I'm not sure what anyone could have said to really sort of take that away, but, and that's something I've just had to learn over time to get better at. That's all it is. Yeah.
Because I imagine it would be easier to ask for help if the help is offered consistently.
It definitely is.
That's what we have to remember. It's not, hey, I said that she can contact me, but I said it 3 months ago. I could have said it many more times since then, right?
And also offering people sort of ideas as well, because sometimes, you might want help, but you don't know what help looks like. So it's saying, oh, look, I love to help. Can I come and make you a meal? Do you want to have coffee sometime? Let's do a phone call, or giving them a few different options, and sometimes thinking outside the box as well. Can I just do like regular life with you? You don't have to be absolutely distraught and upset for me to come and help you, but can I? Because you don't want to get to that point before you ask for help either. So sometimes it's just having someone with you, just doing stuff so you're not feeling lonely, or not when you are feeling quite hard in the inside. That's helpful.
Yeah. So even, hey, I'm running some errands. Would you like to come with me so I don't do boring things on my own? And you just never know what's going to come from that car conversation when someone is feeling so confronted by someone facing them front on. Brenda, at 15, after going away on a school excursion, we touched on it briefly, but you experienced one of the most traumatic and unthinkable acts that anyone can endure, much less recover from. You heard from a news link on Facebook, of all places, social media, that there was a homicide tragedy where parents, two of their children and one of their siblings were killed, and it turned out to be your family.
Yes, that was tough. So what had happened was that I was in New Caledonia with my friend from school. We were there for a language excursion. We were learning French at the time. And this is prior to smartphones and all that. So I think my dad gave me his phone. And global roaming was really expensive. So the idea is I'd only call in an emergency. And the phone was just turned off for most of the time. We were out doing activities, with the group, because we went with my friend from school, but also a group of other sort of students from like local nearby schools as well. So we were in our homestay, we were in like French language classes, we were seeing the local sites, so we weren't on devices that much at all. And on Friday afternoon or evening, I think we had some free time. We were at our homestay, and we were able to use their computer and my friend had logged onto her Facebook. Obviously, someone had seen her sort of notification where she logged on pop up, and they knew that she was with me and sort of asked her, is Brenda okay? And I think both of us were a bit confused because I think quite a few of them asked, is Brenda okay? And then one of them sends us a link, because I think no one knew how to say anything or tell us what happened, so they just sent us a news link. And we'd open, this is also, we weren't expecting bad. And back then, we used to send each other silly links that were sometimes not were viruses, but like just were silly jokes or things that weren't serious at all. So we opened it expecting something stupid like that. Then the next thing sort of I see is a photo of my home on like a newspaper article. And being 15 as I was, and living quite a sheltered sort of life, whereas things happen on the news, bad things happen in the world and they go on the news, but they're not things that will happen to your family. They're not things that happen to people either. So for me, that sort of seeing my photo of my house on like a news website, that was made it real. And that was a really strange feeling, going, it's somehow this sort of virtual hypothetical news world where things that happen on the other side of the country have now just merged with my reality. And that was hard. And I just didn't know how to comprehend it, really.
Oh, but you wouldn't. The stress and the shock of it would almost make you leave your body.
Yeah, I have a very limited memory of what happened. I just remember crying a lot that afternoon. But yeah.
Yeah.
Don't remember
And
much else.
often when something traumatic happens, it's our family that's going to reach out to us. But it was your family that had been tragically taken from you. You were sent to live with your uncle.
So my aunt is my dad's younger sister, and my aunt married my uncle. So my uncle is married into the family, and they used to live around the corner from us as well. So we were quite close knit as a family. We did a lot of weekend trips together. Didn't have a lot of extended relatives in the country, so we did a lot of things together.
So they were already familiar to you. They were already people that were perceived as very safe for you. You had no other reason to think otherwise. And you were sent to live with your aunt and your uncle for your safety. But there was a plot twist, because you were anything but safe in those 2 years. In fact, it would be 2 years before you would learn it was, in fact, the very uncle that had married into your family who was responsible for the murders of your family. And not only that, but in the run-up to this revelation, Robert Z had begun sexually abusing you. There's a lot to unpack here. First of all, you also had not realized that what he was doing to you was inappropriate.
Yeah, and a lot of it's cultural, a lot of it's the things that he was doing to me. It felt uncomfortable, and I felt like it wasn't right, but I didn't understand that equated to sexual assault or sexual abuse. And I think a lot of it's also, the big part of it's cultural. I'm from, I think we talked about earlier, where my parents weren't very affectionate or physically sort of affectionate.
It's almost like, did you even know how to express what had happened to you?
No, and that's where it's really hard, because I think there's one day I wanted to sit my mum down and say, look, this is happening where I don't feel safe to protect me from him, because he'd sort of come over every Friday just to pick us up and take us to our grandparents' house for dinner. And I just wanted to talk to my mum about, I don't want to be left alone with him. And I remember sort of finally, I think I tried a few times, didn't really quite get a chance to sit it down, but there's one time I actually did. And that's when I sort of had this sort of shocking realization that I actually didn't even have the language to say so. I did to tell her what's happened, because my mum's English wasn't that great. So we spoke in Chinese at home, and my Chinese was fairly, was sort of functional for like day-to-day living. But because we never spoke about some of these sort of matters at home, it just meant that I didn't have the right words to even express what I wanted to express. And so that was the end of that. And look, and she was probably, I think she was busy or like sort of rushing to something else, so she couldn't really wait around, and I wasn't very sort of forthcoming with what the problem was, so that opportunity just went.
Did anyone know that this was happening, Brenda? Because you've said that you'd not realised what had happened until many years later, when you realised that you'd actually in fact been sexually assaulted, and this was in fact very illegal. How can we facilitate safe spaces to have these kinds of conversations with people who are experiencing this and are so shocked, so confused by the trauma, but in cases such as yours don't even necessarily have the language to disclose it, especially when we're part of subcultures where topics like this are so taboo? How can we do better? How can we be better for those who are vulnerable within our own family?
A lot of it, I think, is just making sure we have these conversations beforehand and make it part of regular conversation. And it's hard, and it's awkward, it's embarrassing, it's hard. It's always hard to start these things. But as Grace Tame says, nothing is as uncomfortable as the abuse itself. So we're not going, if we don't give people the tools or the language to talk about these things, how can they report it? How can they sort of speak up about it? You're just making the barrier so much higher. So it's normalizing these conversations. And also sort of conversations around what actually is sexual assault, sexual abuse, because it probably is outside. It's there's sort of the common sort of conception of the sexual violence is the stranger in the dark alleyway. If you look at statistics, there's often someone that you know. So we need to sort of have better conversations around that, and also think about how do we not just sort of in mainstream society, but also how to sort of do that in subcultures as well. And like leaders within those sort of subcultures need to sort of start doing that and leading the way.
Yeah, that's true. And how do we do that? I mean, what do we say? What could be some things that we could possibly say?
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? I think it's just really starting to look at sexual assault, sexual violence. It is right now is a time where lots of people are talking about it. It's always on the news. It's there are things happening. So start with those things where it's not related to yourself, where it could be a news item, and also just being really mindful not to engage in any victim blaming language, because once someone hears, even if it's not about them, and sort of if you make a generalized statement that women often lie, or sort of or it doesn't happen to men or something like that. If someone hears and they've experienced it, they will hardly ever, won't ever disclose to you. So you've sort of just cut that off as well. So just being careful about what sort of language we use, and also listening to people as well.
So Brenda, you and your aunt thought that he might have been wrongfully incarcerated and wrongfully accused.
Yeah, because that's what I was hearing at home all the time. That's what my aunt was saying. Yeah,
that's what you were hearing at home all the time. And so that's also why it would have been safe for you to stay there, because you also were told, this is wrong. We're going to get through this. Obviously, a mistake has been made. Until what? What happened that made you think, hang on a minute, there's quite a few things that aren't quite right here?
Yeah, I think it's when the first trial began and some of the evidence was coming out in newspaper reports, which up until that point, I just sort of wanted to turn a blind eye. I didn't want to know anything else happening, and because I firmly believe that he was innocent and that the system had gotten it wrong, because he was a family member, and you should be able to trust your family members. And as a young person as well, who sort of relied on him for care and all that sort of stuff, you think that we can all spot horrible people who sort of kill other people. We should be able to see them. We should know. If we see them somehow we should be able to sort of have an instinct that's them. It's not. It can't possibly be a family member. So all that meant that I didn't believe it was him for quite some time, but it wasn't until the first trial started and there was some stuff coming out in the media reports, which I did see. So some of the evidence was coming out. It didn't make me think it was definitely him, but what it made me question was that actually I thought I knew everything, or I thought I knew him, but actually I don't know everything. And that and just because he's a family member doesn't mean I know his character or know what he is capable of and what he has done. And that's also, I guess, realize, because I think up until then I always thought that, oh look, the courts or the legal people, they can't know him as well as I know him because I've known him for much longer and I've seen him in all sorts of different situations. But it's then realizing actually I don't know him, and the best I can do at that point in time is give the court all the information that I know so they can make the best possible decision, because it's not up to me to judge.
I imagine that you would have had to come into a space to be able to process that and even make that decision. When you were in shock initially, I don't know that you would have had the capacity to think so reasonably like that.
Oh yeah, definitely was a lot of thinking, a lot of time before I got there. Because I think prior to that, as soon as someone said anything, any sort of thing that sort of doubted my uncle, I went straight away to, that's can't be him. I don't want to listen to it. I won't hear it, because that, I guess, also changed my whole sort of world view and my whole world, really. Yeah.
That would have been too much. You had already landed somewhere safely. To even consider that that place wasn't safe would have actually been too much for you as well. What was it like when you still lived with your aunts? Because I know you spoke of the difficulties with your grandparents because you were all simply grieving and processing the trauma very differently.
Yeah. Yes, look, no, my grandparents, I've thankfully have a really great relationship with them now. But at the time it was difficult because we did process trauma in a very different way. They are much more public in the way they sort of express grief. That I've always been a bit shy, so that didn't really work with me. They were also really angry, which is very understandable. I was as well, but I think we sort of channeled it in different ways. So we were all processing and it was difficult, and we just didn't communicate very well. And partly, that's also a language problem as well, because we weren't able to communicate because of just not having the right words to express, how we were feeling and this what's happening for us. Just having a very tunnel vision I think for all of us as well. I definitely had a really, really good school and support system at the school as well. They definitely got me through to university. They made sure I got to university and made sure I got further education, and I'm extremely grateful for that, because without that, I wouldn't be able to do any of the things I do today.
And that in itself is something that we can do as a community, to be able to rally around someone that's experienced that amount of trauma and offer the assistance that is required. Brenda, what was the catalyst that helped you speak up about that awful sexual assault that you had endured?
Well, at the time the trial was about to begin, well, I was about to give evidence at trial, and somehow, I don't know what happened, but I finally made the connection of, actually, this is sexual assault plus, and also this also is relevant information, because I will be called at trial to give good character evidence as well. What is he like as a person? What is he like at home? In my whole entire life that I've known him for. And this is obviously, whether someone is a perpetrator of sexual assault is obviously clear. It's a big thing, means a lot about character. So I did have to, and also knowing that I have to go on the stand and also tell the truth as well. So I had to sort of figure out what to do, and that was really tough, because I knew that if I got on the stand and told everyone what was happening, obviously that would jeopardize my uncle's chances of getting released as well. And
it's a huge thing to hold for someone so young that had already been through unimaginable trauma.
Yeah, it felt like I was making the decision almost. And I know it's not the case, but at the time it felt like I was making the call which way I was going to go. And that was really, really, really tough, because I knew that also would mean that I would lose the new family that I had, which was my aunt. Because since losing my family, I lived with my aunt and my cousin, and we were and she was, we were really, really close because I also lost a family as well. So it's then thinking I valued that family even more. And my aunt has been fabulous. So she was very supportive of me, did a lot for me, and I'm really grateful for that. So I knew what that meant and how disappointed she'd be and the impact it would have on her as well. And that was a really big thing for me.
It was a huge repercussion to lose the only family you had left. That would have been enormous, astronomical, in fact. You've spoken about the incredible friends and family who supported you when you weren't doing so well yourself. Many people's initial reaction would be, well, I just don't know what to say. I don't want to say the wrong thing. Could you speak to that a little, including how you were able to get out of what then became an unsafe environment once you had disclosed? Because I know that once you did disclose, your relationship with your aunt then became a rupture that still hasn't repaired. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So I haven't spoken to my aunt since. It's been quite some years now. That's okay. But I think since then I've gained a lot of other really great family and friends who I'm incredibly grateful for.
Even from an energetic space, it would have taken a lot to process making that decision. But then where would it have been safe for you to go afterwards?
Yeah, so I was really, really fortunate where I disclosed to someone, one of my counselors from school, and this was quite some years after school as well, and she'd been sort of helping me. We kept in contact, and she also had an extra sort of room in her house, and had me come and live with her, and I'm very, very grateful for that because as soon as I told her, it meant that I couldn't live there anymore. But I was welcomed into a new family, had a safe space to go to.
And I see that there's a common theme here of like a safe person that you had stayed in contact with, a safe person that continually said, hey, I'm still here for you. You mean a lot to me. Your well-being means a lot to me. And if you need me, I'm here. And it sounds like they were, which is extraordinary. And you say that you're lucky, but I think that you deserved all the luck in the world, given what you'd had to navigate. What were the specific things and actions that helped you at the time from not just the person that was able to take you in, but from other people that also needed to offer you support? Because you were navigating yet another trauma, yet another magnitude of grief to people that you had lost, that you had to say goodbye to again. It was initially another death, wasn't it?
Knowing that there are still people around and who love you and care for you, no matter what. And there's a lot of credit to be given to my friends from school. Some of which I'm still very, very close with today. And they've also become sort of my second family. And I know that I can go to them when things are good, but also when things are bad. So I've been adopted in lots of different families now, which is absolutely wonderful. Yeah.
You have the reverse problem of people fighting over you now, Brenda, don't you?
Yeah, it's great.
Brenda, as if you weren't busy enough, in 2021, you and 4 other sexual assault survivors started the non-for-profit organization called the Survivor Hub. And just so you know, I've actually referred my clients to this wonderful service, and to now connect the dots and know it's you is amazing.
That's fabulous. It's great that we're getting around a bit as well and that people are finding out about our service and what we do. So thank you for that. Thank you for the referrals.
Well, thank you for creating something as extraordinary as you have. There are currently, forgive me if I have this incorrect, there are 12 locations across New South Wales and Victoria where fellow survivors can connect and meet. Tell us about this extraordinary service, because I know that you're a very big part of it.
Yes, no, definitely. It's a lot of what I do during the week. And I'm very, very passionate about it. So the Survivor Hub, we run peer support groups, and they're safe spaces for survivors to come together, connect with one another, ask questions, and just really heal. And it sort of came out of a need that myself and the other sort of co-founders had realised, because most of us had gone through the legal system or had at least experienced that isolation of being a survivor of sexual assault, and then which is such a unique and isolating and traumatic and sort of intense experience. But then having no one to talk to, no one to connect with, no one to relate with, despite we know the facts around statistics around of how prevalent it is within our society. Yeah, because no one talks about it. No, how do you, and you can't heal without having to sort of speak about it as well. So it sort of came out of that need of wanting to create that sort of safe space for people to go to if they wanted to connect with others who've been through something similar. And that's quite a beautiful and really magical sort of experience as well, where I remember when I met Anna for the first time. Anna and I are very different people with different hobbies, different parts of life. She's a lot younger than I am as well, which also means that there's like a generational gap. Half the stuff that she says I don't understand, and that's okay. But I've never been cool, but that's okay. But it's that instant connection, in spite of all the differences that we have, because we obviously, and also our sort of survivor stories are also very different as well. But because we've had somewhat of a similar-ish experience, that instant connection of like everything that she said I could relate to, and vice versa. And it's that being understood without sort of spelling it out. So I've got fabulous friends who will listen to me and want to understand and have all the time in the world for me, which is so beautiful. But sometimes you're just really exhausted and you don't want to sort of spell out the dots of, okay, this is what happened and this means X, Y, and Z. But sort of speaking to another survivor, going, oh my goodness, like anxieties, all the concerns I'm having, things I'm struggling with, actually that's so normal, or so it's okay. This is nothing wrong with me. So that's the Survivor Hub is really just a space for that, and that was why it was built. And so yes, Patty just said, like, we run them in New South Wales, Victoria. We also run them online, and we're looking at expanding across other locations throughout Australia as well, just because there's such a great sort of need for it as well.
True that. Brenda, your work also potentially evokes your trauma and subsequent trauma response, because you're constantly hearing and sharing and talking about abuse, much like you are today. And you've said that too much time on your own is not necessarily a good thing for you. So in a way, it can be a double-edged sword. You've got to be quite hyper-vigilant about where you're at. No day is ever going to be the same. No trigger will be processed in the same manner either. Can you speak to us a little bit about that and your self-care around that as well?
Yeah, no, of course. It's interesting because I feel like something I've been reflecting on lately as well. Like, my whole life is a trauma response so far. Like, it's everything I do is a trauma response. So I go really hard at things. So I think before the Survivor Hub, I was just doing sort of research work, and so I went really hard at that. And I gave all my time to that. And now with the Survivor Hub, I give all my time to the Survivor Hub and split it with research work as well. So it's interesting because it is, and because when I do give my 110% to something, it's really good. It feels meaningful, feels productive. It feels like it's also a distraction. But if I also know it's valuable because I get to help other people and feel like I'm making a bit of a difference, and that's really helpful for my healing. But I do notice that you do get burnt out quite easily. So then there are times where I will wake up and go, no, today's not happening. I try, but nothing happens, and I'm just like a potato on a couch for a little bit too long. So I think as well, like over time, I've learned to go, actually, no, that's okay. Give myself space to be whatever I need to be in that time. But then at the end of the day, or whatever the next period of time is, I'm going to pick myself up and start again.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And look, for me, getting outside is often really helpful. So I have a little husky. She's absolutely beautiful. We go for lots of walks together. And sometimes if I've had a really bad day, I'll eat junk food, sit on the couch, cry, do all the above, and just feel really sorry for myself. But then actually, no, I'm done. And now I have to move on and have to keep on going. So let's go outside, reset. So sometimes that happens multiple times in a day as well. So it's it's sometimes it's difficult to manage, but and sometimes it works better than others as well. So
yeah, absolutely. Many listeners have said that they don't understand trauma, or sometimes they don't recognize it. And I think it's worth mentioning that there are several trauma responses, so people know not only what to look out for, but how they can adequately respond to it. Because trauma can look like bad behavior, like yelling or acting out, not listening, sometimes oversharing inappropriately, to name a few. Sometimes it's, hey, the world's a bit too much. I've peopled with too many people, and I need to unpeople and be with myself for a little bit, which is so healthy. I love that you said that. For our listeners out there who love someone that might have survived and experienced sexual violence and they're in an intimate relationship with them, are there some tips that you can share around showing up in a way that is safe and loving and nurturing?
I think that's such a great question, actually, because it's also such a practical question. I think, this probably is similar to some things we talked about earlier, where it's being there for them, let them know that you're there to listen when they're ready, letting them take the lead in terms of how much they wish to share and how much they don't want to share. But also, just having sort of, sometimes the survivor might be better at initiating conversations, sometimes they won't be, but even if they're not, try and have those sort of conversations beforehand and sort of check in with them, how are they feeling, because it's much easier for someone to say yes or no to something than it is for them to bring up the scenario. So if and just normalizing that, and the more they feel safe and they have safe and positive experiences, the better it just gets better as well, and they'll also have more confidence. I think for a lot of survivors, it's just wanting to know that they're heard, understood, mostly just validated and that and believed. And that is easy, just asking them questions and just nodding out, and not sort of asking them any questions that might lead them to think that they're not being believed, or always sort of victim blaming sort of questions as well. So,
Brenda, have there been other types of therapies that have been helpful for you? I mean, what worked for you and maybe what didn't work so well? Because you were inspired to start Survivors Hub, which is a big peer support. And for some people, like one-on-one therapy works very well. For others, it doesn't. What was it like for you?
Yeah, I think I tried one-on-one therapy at the beginning. Well, I didn't get it for quite some time, actually, because being from an Asian background, mental health isn't a real problem. Therefore, you also don't get help for it because it's not a real problem. So I don't think I saw a psychologist for quite some time. And I had access, obviously, to my school counselor. She was really great. But I don't think I really sort of believed I had, like, that mental. I sort of was really staunch enough, mental health isn't affecting me. I'm fine. But then obviously I wasn't. So I definitely did go through a few psychologists before I sort of found a really good fit. Because all the ones I've seen prior to him, they were lovely people. It wasn't like they said something that was offensive, or I felt like they weren't qualified, or I felt like, or anything. It was more that it didn't quite click. And so it took quite some time. And I currently see my psych every 2 weeks, and I've been seeing for quite a few years now. But I don't think I really found him until about sort of 5-ish years ago. So for quite some time, I was just going in between different people, and then I sort of gave up after a while because it didn't really work, and and obviously it's expensive, and so I think that's sticking with it, and takes some time. But also there's also other things as well. And through the Survivor Hub has been really great because I've been getting lots of different sort of strategies or ideas from people. People have talked about flotation tanks, for example, as being quite healing. I personally wouldn't go in them because I can't swim, and that freaks me out. But apparently I hear they're great, and apparently silent discos are as well. So there's lots of also alternative sort of strategies or healing sort of methods that sort of fall outside of just sort of CBT based sort of psychology sort of sessions.
Now, I've got only a few more questions for you regarding how you can make someone else's journey a little bit easier by sharing yours. And this is specifically in relation to our theme, because some listeners out there will have experienced something similar to what someone else discloses to them. How do we show our empathy and share our story without our story becoming all about us? Because we want to hold that space for someone. And when appropriate, we want to share that space, much like you do at Survivor Hub, I imagine. But what can we do to ensure that we don't simply take the space and make it about us?
Yes, that's something, again, I think we practice, and that's quite hard to do as well, because when someone connects with you, you want to sort of get everything out there, you want to connect, you want to share your story. And that's a wonderful thing, but also it's recognizing sometimes you need to take a step back. So when we first started the Survivor Hub, I know our first few meetups, I remember that myself and other co-founders, we were very quick to jump in to answer questions what other participants have, or share our aspects of our experiences, which is wonderful, and it was great. But then as we've done more of these groups and having more experiences, also realizing actually there's a lot of value in stepping back and letting other people contribute first, and we're there to facilitate the conversation as opposed to taking over the space. We just want to make sure the conversation is flowing well. Everyone's being respectful, jump in where we should, but also try and take that step back a little bit more. And you can do that with it doesn't have to just be at a support, like a support group at one of our meetups, but just in regular life as well. It's reading like the social cues of the other person, thinking about the context. Are they're disclosing to you for the first time? And sometimes it's helpful to say, look, actually I've been through something similar, or I felt the same way too, or in this situation, but not me, letting them sort of lead the conversation and where they want to take it as well. So not taking over the space and not just going, oh, actually you experienced it, let me tell you all my story.
Or something horrible like, that's nothing, you should hear what happened to me.
Don't ever do that. No, experiences are never comparable anyway, so it's
correct. Brenda, I feel like I've got a bit of a loaded question for you right now, because we've had several chats offline and we already know each other a little bit. And you've opened up and shared some really significant trauma and private pain with me. And I'm now going to turn it into a podcast for the rest of the world. And I kind of need to know if you're okay and what I can possibly do for you if you're not. Because I'd love to know what you might need to do next in order to recalibrate from what you've just shared. I mean, we had to reschedule our chat and you've graciously donated your lunch hour. So there's that. First of all, have you eaten?
Not yet. So I'll go downstairs once we finish and eat some food, but also jump back into training. So I'm looking at some training for data collection for my PhD. So I'll go back into real life or what I need to do, which sometimes that's quite helpful for me. It's that distraction's always been helpful, just having structure and having something to go to. Yeah. And then later tonight, in the afternoon when I finish, I'll go back to where I'm staying. My dog's there. I'll take her for a bit of a walk, which she'll need and will absolutely love. And that'll be quite good for me. Yeah.
Okay. So that's your self-care. That's what you're going to take care of. Okay. And in reference to our RAVs and our RAV stars and our RAVers, I need to know, because everyone needs to know, are you a solo walker or do you like walking with company?
I love company. I love walking. But also I find walking is a great time to catch up with people. So sometimes it's actually good to have hard conversations then as well. But also it's good to have easy conversations. It's good for all sorts of conversations, really.
This is true. Brenda Lin, you are fabulous. Thank you for sharing so generously with us and imparting your...
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
You're so welcome. And that is it for today, folks. I'm now going to pass the baton to our fabulous co-founder, Kiralee D, and she's going to share some amazing information about what RAV are up to behind the scenes. If you have found this episode to be helpful, please do share it with someone that you think could benefit from hearing it. Liking, subscribing, and especially leaving us a 5-star review ensures that we get to give the algorithm a helping hand to get to the listeners that need to hear from us the most. Bye from us for now.
Thanks, Brenda and Patty, for a brilliant conversation. I have learned an enormous amount from listening to the two of you. I always walk away a wiser person when I have the opportunity to listen to someone who has lived through an extraordinary experience. And Brenda, your ability to articulate what has gone on for you and to help us all learn from that. It's an incredible skill you have, and thank you for your kindness and your generosity. I'm Kiralee Deer, and I am one of the founders of Run Against Violence. Run Against Violence is a not-for-profit, volunteer-led organisation dedicated to the prevention of family violence. Our mission is to build communities where family violence can no longer live. And one of our key strategies is to have these caring conversations happening throughout our communities. I walked away with 3 key learnings from today's interview. Firstly, I really value the insight around the fact that a caring conversation doesn't necessarily have to be using words. Most of the communication that goes on between human beings is non-verbal. So to be able to care for someone and to help that person feel like they are cared for, sometimes it's just about doing stuff together. Simple stuff, going for a walk, inviting them to come along and do the shopping with you, help them be part of what we consider a fairly normal lifestyle. When you're going through extraordinary experiences, often normality is your saviour. The second key takeaway I had from today is that children especially don't always have the words to describe what they are feeling, and that becomes an enormous barrier to communication. So it's on the rest of us to help break down that barrier through observing what's going on for that child, noticing changes in behaviour, all those sorts of things that enable us to start the conversation and to have the patience to listen. And finally, I think a really simple but important tip is to let the person lead their conversation about their life. Too often we want to overcome our own discomfort in those challenging conversations by offering lots of detail about our own lived experience, when in fact what we need to be doing is asking good questions, then listening, learning what's going on for them, and helping them step through what they need to have happen. Listen, learn, and then care. They're the 3 words that are on the sleeve of this year's t-shirt, and that's why we put them there. They're a brilliant prompt for all of us to be able to participate in caring conversations.
Rav.
Run against violence.